Hello, my name is Chris Maynard from CMI VFX. Today I'll be taking you through the process of preparing your images for 3D compositing applications. We'll be using Photoshop using layers, found images, and created images. Let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we'll need to do is create a planet asset. Let's go ahead and start by creating a file, new, document, naming the file planet, and selecting 1000 pixels by 1000 pixels. I will fill the background with black by holding down the Alt and Delete keys simultaneously, and I will add a new layer, allowing myself to drag a marquee of a circular notion and fill that also with black. Now we basically have a big black dot on a black background. Now what I'll do is actually paint in a base color or an edge color to our planet. I'll go into full screen mode so we can see a little bit better. Selecting a brush, just an airbrush of a decent size, and just lightly grazing the top of the color like that. If you feel that you've added too much color, or the color is just simply too bright, go ahead and play with your Control U key to sort of maybe lower the saturation, maybe even the brightness. Shift it from one side to another. I'm going to start off with a color like that. That looks good. And now I'm going to put in an actual texture. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go into your files, open up an image for your paint texture. I'm going to use this planet texture. I'm going to select Edit, Define Pattern, naming the pattern what you want, and selecting the OK. Now, when you go into your brush settings, you can select your settings for it, and in the textures box, you should see your texture. If it's not there, go ahead and select it from the list. Make sure you select it to color burn, and let's go ahead and actually increase the size of the brush a little bit. If we paint with the same color, you'll notice that not much is happening. Of course, we did change the saturation level. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a sample of this color, and I'm going to raise it up a bit. I might put 2 or 3 different strokes on there. Let me go ahead and grab it, just raise it up a small amount. I'm going to put a first pass by actually increasing the brush to an enormous size and just sort of grazing the top like that. Now I'm going to do another pass with a slightly brighter color and just sort of regrazing it again. Increasing the size could also help. In this case, what I want to do is go into the brush settings itself and increase the scale. Okay. Now don't forget, we're going to be performing some additional actions on this, and it's going to look a lot better when we do. So we'll have something like that. Now I'm going to actually add a third color in there, something to give it a little bit more pop. Maybe in the redder side, a little bit more saturation. And I'm going to go ahead and drop it down. Something like that, and maybe even on a whiter side. There we go. Okay, now we can also go into our Control U again, and this time I'm actually going to do a colorize, increase the saturation a little bit, and bring in my earthy tones like that. Go into the highlight colors if you want to, but let's just go ahead and basically seal the deal. I don't know, right around there. That looks fine. I do see a little line right there I'm going to try to get rid of, so what we're going to do is we're going to go into the heal brush and basically just select a region and try to tap it away. If it doesn't work, keep trying different regions until it's gone. Now, that's close enough. You're not even going to see that on the latest image. So what we're doing now, in order to give this an actual circular and spherical feel to it, I'm going to go into the filters menu, select distort, and go ahead and select the spherize filter at 100%. Go ahead and apply, and as you see, it's starting to give that shape. I'm going to do it one more time at half that size. If you want to zoom out on your filters to make sure you're getting it properly, we'll just sort of zoom out until we're pleased with the shape of the planet. I'm thinking that actually looks good. So we're around 59% for this particular instance. Play around with the slider on yours. That looks pretty good. Now we can go ahead and save this file. And now we have something to continue working with. Let's go ahead and create some detail now. Since we duplicated the layer, or actually filtered out the layer in order to create an edge, you'll see that if I cut my actual file, you'll notice that there's this brown edge on there. That's what we're going to get rid of right now. So you cut your current selection, paste it again, and go ahead and delete your last selection. Name this planet, of course, and go ahead and center it into your view. In this case, right around there is good for me. I'm going to duplicate this layer, and we're going to call it planet copy, which is fine. And we're going to start building up some atmosphere on the planet, which we'll certainly need. The layer mode, right off the bat, I'm going to change to linear dodge, and I'm going to actually reduce the fill opacity in a minute. But first, let's go ahead and add some color. I'm going to go into my outer glow, and we're going to change this planet most likely to blue later down the line. So let's go ahead and start creating our blue color. I'm going to dump it in with a medium saturation. Copy this because we'll need it for the other effect, and start to increase the size. I'm going to bump it up. It's a little too much. Something like that. If we go into our inner glow and we paste in our color, and we can actually start to increase it as well. This is going to give our atmosphere. Now you notice that the actual planet is starting to come across like it's got gases now, and that's really what we want. However, we don't want it to fall gaseous on the dark side of the planet. We are going to have to eliminate some of this. So let's go ahead and do a couple tricks. I'm going to hit OK. This creates our item. I'm going to create the fill opacity down to 0. As you can see, now we're starting to get a little bit closer to what the planet should look like. So the fill opacity is 0, yet our effect is still on basically 100%. So in order just to preserve the effect on its own layer and get rid of that planet data, I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to link it with the old layer, and I'm actually going to say merge linked while selecting the top layer, and we're going to call this atmosphere or gas to save my typing skills. And now we can actually start to add a layer mask to eliminate some of this data that we do not want. In this case, just go up to layer, add layer mask, reveal all, and we're going to take our paintbrush. Remember to probably get rid of our paint texture, just like that. So let's turn off the texture for the planet. And now I'm going to dump down into a lower brush, something like this. And let's go ahead and just paint some dark values. Don't worry about it because we can actually blur it later. And that's looking pretty cool, but we want to smooth it out a little bit more. So I'm going to select filter, blur, Gaussian blur, while my gas mask is actually selected. And let's go ahead and just tweak it until we restore a nice smooth gas edge on there. I'm thinking that looks pretty good right about there. And now we can actually lower the opacity of the gas. Now we have what seems to be kind of a pretty accurate looking planet, except for the fact that our texture is flat. We want to have some sort of surface detail, which would include a highlight from the distant sun and the shadow from the land masses casting shadows. In this case, let's go ahead and save our file first, so then we can continue. Remember that you always have different types of application layer options. I'm going to go ahead and select some random ones to see what comes up nicer. I like the fact that the linear dodge lightens the planet to a decent extent. I'm going to raise the opacity back up now and sort of preserve some of my blue gaseous thing going on the outside, which I like. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some of that texture we were just talking about. Let's go ahead and duplicate the layer. And I'm going to go ahead and just use a filter emboss, and I believe it's in the stylize. Yep, there it is. And the settings I have here are -33, height of 1, and the amount of 500. And I'm going to leave that as it is. And I'm going to select Control U, and I'm going to grab the saturation slider and completely remove that. And let's go ahead and duplicate that. We'll call the top one highlight, or HL, and we'll call the bottom one shad for shadow. And I'm going to do the shadow first. First, let's go ahead and select the levels, and I'm going to apply a multiply on this just to see how it works by default. And ironically, I almost like it just like that. But let's go ahead and do some tests. Actually, you know what? I think I like it just like that. I was going to perform a separate highlight layer and a separate shadow layer, but this is sort of giving me exactly what I needed. I'm going to maybe reduce it just a little bit, and I'm going to play with the adjustment brightness contrast and see if I can't tweak it to a perfect level. See, as you see here, it would create more mountainous regions at great expense. However, it doesn't look that great. I'm going to increase the value to about a +5, and if I play around with the brightness, I might just be able to increase the content of the planet, increase some of the contrast again. So my satisfaction level is about a +30, and the brightness, and about a +25 on the contrast. And let's go ahead and save that file. Now, in order to get this file out into a format that we can use, I'm going to go ahead and delete the highlight layer. I'm going to leave the shadow as both shadow and highlight. And I'm going to deselect the background. And now we have a basic planet on an empty clear sphere. I'm going to go File, Save for Web. And for this particular application, I'm going to go ahead and select PNG 24-bit, which is fine for the tutorial. If you want to create a Targa with, or even EXR format with floating point capability, go ahead and do so. I'm going to save this file out with the transparency like so. I'm going to say Save, go into Planet, and I'm going to select my file, which would be in Planet, and let's go Planet New _01 PNG. Hit save, and we are now done with that. So let's move on to the next item. No space scene would be complete without a star field, so let's go ahead and create a new document. I'm going to create the name as star field 01, and I'm going to select an HD format, 720p. It's going to create the guides for me, which I'll remove. This is going to be for probably a lower resolution. We're going to be needing a larger size to pan in both vertical and horizontal ways. However, we could also keep it at this aspect ratio and sort of zoom in a little bit depending on what you want. General rule of thumb is work larger than what you need. When you shrink the files up, they always look 10 times better. I'm going to keep 1:1 right now, since the video that you'll probably be watching this on is going to be significantly smaller. So let's go ahead and create that document. I'm going to be running at 8-bit right now. You're going to want to increase that depending on the output that you're going to need. I'm going to go into the view. I'm going to say clear guides, and I'm going to fill the background, yes, you've guessed it, with black. Now, in order to create a realistic star field, you will need to Notice that stars have different values. They twinkle, they have different colors, but for the main part, they have different sizes and weights. And we're going to try to duplicate that now by using some filters. Let's go ahead and create a filter noise, add noise, and go ahead and select monochromatic right off the bat, because if you don't, you're going to have a fruit bowl of colors in here. I don't know if you can see this, but basically it's just a bunch of random noise that you would get off of a TV set. We definitely don't want to do that. So select Gaussian and monochromatic, and I'm going to leave the 10%, which is fine. Let me go ahead and increase this to about 100 size. That's 100% size right there. I'm going to increase it one more time so you can get a look at it. Now we need to start to vary these stars. They're way too small and clustered together. That's just how the algorithm works for the noise function. So let's go ahead and fix that. I'm going to go into the image, adjustment, brightness, contrast, and now basically this is totally artistic. You just sort of screw around with this until you find what you're looking for. I'm going to just keep on adjusting. The lowering the brightness will help separate the value of the stars. Increasing the contrast will bring all the stars that I've lost back to me. I'm looking like we're getting close. I'm going to say something like that. Use your discretion. Okay. Now what we'll need to do is actually have this background layer have its own name. We'll say small stars. And I'm actually going to go ahead and add an additional layer on the background, which I should have left as default. I'm going to say background and fill that with black. We'll probably never use it, but let's just make it just to be safe. This I'm going to select to linear dodge. Nothing will happen because the background value is set apart. But if I decided to fill this background with, say, a bright or maybe a dark blue color, let's be fair, you notice that the stars are now preserved in their white space. Actually, they do an additive type of effect with linear dodge, and they increase the color of the background exponentially. Now, I'll show you an example of this later on, or you could refer back to the planet tutorial when we did the gas around the planet. Let's go ahead and put this back to black for now so I can see what's going on. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this star field, and I'm going to select this as my large stars. We need to have several different layers. The more layers you have of stars, the more accurate it's going to look. In this case, we have an exact duplicate. We're going to want to scale this up a bit. Edit, transform, scale. About twice the size for now. I'm going to hit OK, and we're going to zoom in to see the result. We got some fuzzy looking things happening here. We need to sort of isolate that and bring back the stars down to an accurate size. Let's go ahead and invert the color so you can see what's going on here. And let's bring up the levels. Go to the adjustment levels, and let's start setting some values here. That's a little bit better. Now I'm actually seeing the brightness of the stars, and you can see where the lighter stars are and the darker stars are. Now they're represented by tiny little, almost pixel-sized pixels, and we're going to fix that by scaling them down. Let's go ahead and re-invert that. As you see here, it looks like a hellacious snowstorm. That's okay, don't panic. We're going to adjust the brightness and contrast on that in a second. I'm going to bring this. As a matter of fact, if you want to do it now, it's simple. We'll go to Image, Adjustment, Brightness, Contrast, because I don't like the way we have it set. I'm going to drag the brightness all the way down and increase the contrast about halfway. Now, if I reduce the size of this, Edit, Transform, Scale, and bring it back down to a reasonable amount. Now we have a decent star field starting to be built. As you can see here. Now basically all we have to do is start to paint out the details. it kind of looks like we have our stars zooming out at us. So let's go ahead and actually transform them by rotating the image. We'll have to do it the hard way. So let's go ahead and select our thing, edit, transform, rotate 180 degrees. Now we have a variance of that particular value. If I look at the background stars and I look at the foreground stars, there's a huge difference in weight. I'm going to go ahead and mess around with the levels a little bit more. See if I can't get them to sort of dissipate some. That'll do. Now basically this is the artistic part. Just keep painting. We can start painting with two tools. We can add a layer mask, which will allow us to undo our mistakes, or we can use an eraser tool. I prefer to use a layer mask. Let's go ahead and create a layer mask for both of these layers. I'll say reveal all, and also for the small stars, layer, add layer mask, reveal all. And I'm going to turn off the large stars for now. And I'm going to start painting out some of my shapes by using a hard brush, not a soft brush. You don't want to use a soft brush. Use a hard brush and increase it to something around 20 or 30, 25. It's up to you. And start painting out random areas. Just feel free to go ahead and start whacking it at any spot there. I'm going to increase my size a little bit there. Just kind of randomly select some stuff. And do this also for the top layer. Might as well have the bottom layer on. And just start, be brutal with this. We'll bring back some stars another way. Okay, now we have started something. Let's go ahead and turning off that layer, and I'm going to select my layer mask and say filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And let's bring back some of that star shape. Okay, we have something like that. Now I'm going to go ahead and increase the brightness and contrast of the layer mask. Okay, now we should do the same thing. We can actually go ahead and fill our mistakes up with the paintbrush again, in case we in fact do not like the way it's coming out, which I do not. Let's have a centralized area. What do you think? Maybe a vortex type thing happening. Doesn't have to be too accurate yet. Now you don't have to be a pure artist to do this, although it definitely helps. Let me reduce my size here and play around with another concept a little bit. Let's see if I can't create some repercussion type of effects. Sort of give it a nice swirly type effect. And now I know that we're not going to have that many stars in our field, so now we can actually start to do some other things. Let's go ahead and go to the filter blur, see if we can't bring it to the level of what we want. Alright, we're going to call that a first pass. I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to hide my last one, and I'm going to actually apply this layer mask. I'm going now to add another layer mask, layer, add layer mask, and repeat the process. I do not need all these clouds, or all these shapes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the filter, render, clouds, to sort of help create a better star fill type effect. And inside, with that cloud shape inside of my layer mask, I'm going to go image, adjust, brightness, contrast, and start to pull out the shapes that I want. Now I'm going to have some sort of globular type cluster in the center here. Okay, I'm not sure I like where the clouds are going on that effect, so I'm going to undo that, select it, and I'm going to actually create another render clouds. I'm going to invert the colors here real quick. Filter, render, clouds. This is just simply replacing the same effect. And I'm going to drop down some color on top of that. Let me increase. Raise my opacity down a little bit. And I'm going to sort of just follow what I got there. I like what's going on now. And invert it and start maybe carving out some shapes. Now remember, the more layers the merrier, so if you have some layers that you want to actually start tweaking and stuff, that'll help with a 3D composite it with parallax. You can sort of do zoom type effects and all sorts of types of Star Wars type feels and stuff like that. But in the meantime, just sort of have fun with it. It's going to take some time. And we're getting to kind of an interesting thing happening right here. I'm going to bring in some more of the stars in the center, but on random levels. Remember, stars are always changing size from the next one. And I don't know if you can see where we're going with this, but see this central area? We're going to make a type of galaxy type vortex type kind of thing. I'm not sure yet. Let's go ahead and save the document, and I'll save that like that and do some pondering. I might want to increase the size of these stars, so let's go ahead and duplicate them to see what happens. Now I'm getting this really bright effect. Maybe if I play around with that opacity a bit, see if I can bring in some color. I'm going to actually step that together, and now what I'm going to do is leave it like that, and I'm going to flatten all these layers. Now this is where you get brave, but go ahead and flatten all these layers. Save before you do it, and sort of merge linked. I'm going to delete that star layer and start using, we'll call this stars. I'll spell it right. And start using your clone tool to sort of bring out the shape. The best recommendation is to clone from right next to each other. You have different settings here. You got normal here, and we'll do a color dodge. I'm going to select color dodge for now and see if I can't do some additive type effects. Let's go to the softer brush of a larger size. And let's select from right next to each other. And that's at a 20%, so let's increase it up some. See how we can actually build some stars. It's hard to see, so increase it to 100%. And now we're just adding stars on top of them, making a full rich body. If we changed it from color to normal, what you'll see is that we're actually just replacing stars. And in that case, that was pretty good. I want to bring in some of this over here, soften that edge up, bring in some of this here. Now, if you can't see what's going on, let me try to zoom in for you. Now, the holes should be a little bit on the softer side. sort of smooth it out and get rid of all those hard edges that you really don't want. Some might argue that you want hard edges. Just go take a look at some of the Hubble telescopes imagery and decide for yourself. I mean, really, that's all there is to it. I'm going to start to kill off some of this outside star edge. And you could even do some painting too if you want. You want to paint out some areas in black or continue to erase. Nobody's stopping you. Alright, that's starting to look kind of interesting. This edge right here needs a little work. Let's go back to the color dodge. See if I can't add some flavor there. Looks like that's working nicely. Take some of these big stars, add some flavor here. Just keep on adding them until the values are so intense that they stand up for the rest. That looks pretty cool. Just going to take some time. And I'm going to make a light value here, a light value here, and keep the rest probably as it is. So let's go ahead and start doing that. Keep on painting there, just slightly, you know, offset it, making that globular cluster. Feel free to start bringing in the small shapes too. Don't be afraid of the small stars. You want them in there too. And get in some color right there. And you might have to go back to normal in case you overdo it. Don't be afraid to underdo it. Use different opacities. I tend just to use a solid opacity. I don't know if it's because of laziness or I like to do the trial and error type of thing, but it's up to you. Let's tie it together with some DI stars, intermediary stars. And I'm getting pretty close now to what I'm looking for. Maybe we'll expand a little star trail out this way, and let's connect these suckers in here. I should have a main central hub, and let me smooth out this. Go ahead and do a normal replace here. Want it to be a nice sort of branched off effect. One more tentacle, I'll call it. I'm going to go back to my color dodge, start spinning it off this way. Now that's getting me more of what I'm looking for. That's better. Randomness is definitely what helps. And I'm going to have to shrink the brush this time. Thought I could get away with it, but I couldn't. Maybe shrink it down half size. There we go. Same with this guy. Oh, that came out real nice. And start to point that one out. And a little too much. Not bad. Now we can do a brightness contrast if you wish. Let's go into, well, that's about 100% right there. I'm going to actually save this because I like where it's going. And let's think about this for a second. Yep, I think it's time to actually give this some glow. I am a little worried about the values in here, so I'm going to see if the burn tool can actually help me out in this case. I'm going to grab the burn tool, see if I can't. Yeah, that's not what I wanted. Okay, let's redo that. Step 4. Okay, I'm going to actually reduce some of this area here. Go back into your clone tool if you need to do that. Sometimes you got to step back in order to figure it out. Go into normal. I'm going to start pulling out some of this shape. I think it's a little bit too harsh. A little too harsh in here. And I want it to have, you know, close to that look. I don't want it to be perfect, but yet this tentacle actually is a little too much. I do want some feedback right here though. So let me go ahead and go back into my color dodge. Again, this is completely artistic for you. It's up to you how you want to handle it. Going to sort of bring in some backsplash. I like that. And who knows, maybe tie it in. Yeah, so I kind of like what's going on here, and I think I want to add some color down here too, bring it into some sort of realistic type of environment. Yeah, that's nice how it doesn't actually connect perfectly right there. You know, it's almost, but not quite. I'm going to go into my normal, sort of smooth that out even a little bit more. Yeah, that looks good. That looks real good. So let's go ahead and, who knows, to balance off the image, it's primarily to the left here. I'm going to just bring in some color here and here and be done with this so we can get on with our lives. Right in there. And let's go ahead and add something here. I'm going to go back into my normal and paint in something like that. Yeah, just like that. Let's release that opacity. Give it some variation. All right, take a look at it. We're about at that level right there. Looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and save that and call that the base star field. Let's go work on the glow now. Come back into your full screen mode. I'm going to duplicate the layer, and I'm going to actually blur it. I'm going to leave it on linear dodge, of course. Brightens it up. I'm going to go into the filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and just a couple pixels. You don't want to get overboard on this. 5 to 10 range might do the trick. Gives it an overall glow. I'm going to go ahead and try that right there. And I'm going to Control B. And let's start adding some color to it. Not too bad. Bring in some blue. Too much there. Maybe too much cyan. See if you want to bring in some ultraviolet rays in there. I'm going to just a hint of that color. And that looks pretty good right there. That's something to start off with. I can still see that my stars are a little bit bright. I'm going to go ahead and just fix it with the clone tool. Grab the clone tool again. I'm going to got my opacity down on this time. I'm going to increase the brush a little bit, and I'm just going to get a little bit on the offensive. And not to, eliminate the gases that we have constructed so well for ourselves. But let's just call it like that for now. Before we get into star flares and larger stars and increasing the brightness and contrast, which I'm going to do in about a second, I'm going to add a dust layer. I'm going to reduce this down a little bit. It's up to you how much. Maybe I'll leave it. Go into the star layers and actually just go into my image adjustment, brightness, contrast, and see if I can't vary up these stars a little bit more. Changing the contrast. Kind of there. It's so bright and strong. I want to perhaps, get rid of some of that value. See what happens when I turn on the stars there. Okay, then we'll go ahead and add some localized star value. Let's go ahead and add some dust. I'm going to create a new layer. And, one of the coolest things that I'd like to do is basically just go in, select a brighter color, and render the filter, render clouds. And right off the bat, you're probably offended on what the look is. So we can go into the color dodge. And you see that we have like a specific amount of dust. Let's lower it down to a level. Let's go to screen, see if that helps out. We can invert it. Go back into color dodge again. And just keep on bumping up the values. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to Control B. If you take a look at the normal value here, you'll see that it's this orange color because I inverted it, but I wanted to get the opposite of what it rendered. So I'm going to go back into the color dodge, and I'm going to go into the Control B and basically slide my sliders around until I get a value that gives me a decent amount of dust. If you want to bring in some purples and stuff like that, that could also help create a stellar type of look. There's lots of different colors out there if you look at the Hubble telescope imagery. And you can just basically jack it up all the way. Just play around with it. It's your call. Again, this is just a dust layer. You might even be able to get some interesting type of effects. Go into the highlights, see if I can change these to more of a blue. And if you don't like where it's going, basically you just have to start from scratch again. You just go into the color that you're looking for. In this case, I'm going to select black as my background. I'm going to go Filter, Render Clouds, and see where that takes me. Now if I turn off my other layers, select normal, I'm going to go ahead and go Image, Adjustment, Brightness, Contrast. See if I can't bump that up. And I'll do a feather on that later. Go ahead and select the color dodge one more time. And let's go to Filter, Blur. Down to Blur. See if I can't fix that somehow. Yeah. Let's go back a couple steps. Alright, looks like we're going to have to deal with the dust on this layer. I'm going to create another layer. And I'm going to add some dust into these areas because you probably can't see that the dust is there. If I turn it off, you can see that the dust is there. I can duplicate this layer, and yeah, you're starting to get some cool looking effects, but it's a little too bright and not believable at this phase of the illustration. So let's go up, create another layer, and after I rename the first one, call it Dust 1, we'll create more parallax by adding a second dust layer. I'll say Dust 2, and I want to actually just paint in some color using my textured brush. Select that, go into my textured brush, and add that texture from the Planet tutorial. Turn off the shape dynamics actually, and I'm going to scale it up a bit and my brush and see what happens here. Okay. Kind of increase this item, see what happens with the texture. Okay, it's not giving me texture. What is wrong? Texture is selected. Interesting. Well, when in doubt, my texture brush isn't working. I will have to report that bug. But let's go ahead and just lay in some basic color in. We can do this the same way with noise. I can lay in some big color pieces. Go into the filter, noise, add noise, jack it up. Go into filter, blur, jack that up. And last but not least, go into the layer mask, add reveal all, go into filter, render clouds. Now, allow me to turn this all off so you can see what's going on. You can see that I got a real nice cloud type texture here. Now, the color of the clouds can actually change. You might want to consider like a rainbow type effect. This will be a foreground cloud. I'm going to go ahead and select the Control B and just see what I can do to get these colors to maybe be on a purplish side. I'm not sure if that's going to look right yet. I have a feeling with our planet texture, this could actually come out pretty cool. All right, I'm liking the violets. Now what I'm going to do is actually fill in the middle ground to sort of tie it all together. So we're going to have like a split tertiary color scheme. If you guys aren't familiar with that, whenever you have an opposite of one color, so if I have red and the opposite would be green, a split tertiary would be the red color and the two opposite colors next to the green. So it would include chartreuse, the green, and the light blue. Basically, that's a split tertiary color system. So with that in mind, we can go into the stars copy. Let's see if I can adjust some of the saturation in here and maybe offset it to include that type of effect. And now we're just starting to get like a little bit crazy. I don't know if I like that. I'm actually going to cancel that. We'll start off just by reducing the opacity of this. And let's go ahead and lay in some, what I like to call lens flares. And how you basically make the lens flares. This is one of the more tedious items, but completely necessary. I'm going to create a layer. You can actually create a new document if you want. I'm going to say File, Select New, and create a 500 by 500. And we're not even going to save this. We're just going to throw it out. Fill it. Make it full screen. Create a new layer. Select a marquee, circular. Going to the filter, render, lens flares. Be sure to fill it with a foreground color. In this case, black. And actually, I'm going to undo that and show you a little shortcut. If you go into the select function and select feather, I'm going to actually feather this by 15 several times. Select feather 15, select feather 15. There's a reason for it. You can't see it yet, but if I fill the color now, you basically see that we have this nice little blurred out area. I'm going to select a render filter called lens flare and try to knock it right into the center there as best you can. You'll know it's in the center because the lens flares start to stack up on each other. I'm going to select the 105 prime and probably reduce the opacity a little bit. See if I can play with that a little bit. Okay, now we have this nice little lens flare. It's got black multiplied onto it. Don't worry about that. Select the entire layer, copy it. I'll leave it open in the background. And now I'm going to just paste it. And I'm going to show you that if you select the screen mode and or color dodge mode, you get some interesting type effects. So let's go ahead and create a normal layer. I'm going to duplicate it and hide it. I'm going to call this main star, just in case I screw up and I want to resurrect the original star. Let's go ahead and start laying down some of the shapes. I'm going to select the color dodge for now and maybe start spreading them around randomly, and I am going to shrink them. I definitely am going to shrink them, and I want to put my dust layer actually on top. Right, that's about how accurate it should be. Although, when I had it down here, it did pick up these nice colors, but it doesn't have the depth that it needs. And perhaps even the dust should be in front of it. So now what I'm going to do is just start randomly scaling these down, transform scale. And this could be a real pain in the butt. I mean, it's going to take a while. So go ahead and, you know, get comfortable. Some of these stars you might want big. I'm going to say no to that if I were you. You really want this to look like a star field, not really like a single system with a star background. Because if in fact you were close to a sun, these stars would not nearly be this bright. This is something that you might see, technically speaking, only through a telescope, but through sci-fi movies, you have it sort of loaded like it was actually like a real thing. You might not actually get an opportunity to see something like that without a telescope. So even if you're out in outer space, it's probably not likely to happen. But enough of the science. Let's go ahead and duplicate this guy. I want a double cluster here, maybe something like that. Go back into my first star and shrink that up. Let's go ahead and actually save this real quick. Again, you'll see that we just have a bunch of star layers happening, and I'll tell you what, there's not a whole lot you can do about not needing those stars. So each layer gets its own star. You can bake them at a later point. However, I think we'll keep them separate because when we add them into our composite, and I think we can probably pull them out to give you more 3D depth as the camera passes by the planet scene, which, if you haven't guessed, that's what we're about to do. And feel free to stack these stars on top of each other. Oh, that one didn't quite take. Shrink that one up a little bit more. Make sure you hit the enter key after each one clearly, otherwise it will bail out on you. And let's see what happens with the screen modes. I got the screen mode there. And see if I can't make that do something that I want. Let's go into the Control B, see if I can't get that to really pop. Image adjustment, brightness, contrast, to sort of pull out some of that outside edge. Now I went and screwed it up with the saturation level. Alright, maybe we'll have one or two big stars in there. Thinking that we have a smaller one over here somewhere. I'm going to balance out the scene, but realistically, where is it? You know what I mean? So let's go edit, transform, scale. Alright, and that other one's just obscene. Edit, transform, scale. Now let's sort of zoom out to an extent to see what the accurate size would be. And I hate that star. It's not actually working. But on the lighter note, we can take it, move it way over here, and I'm going to turn it into a color dodge. Yeah, and start to bring these little guys all around the scene where they may or may not occur. And last but not least, I'm going to go back into the main stars. This is the glow. See how increasing the glow can help me out here. Give me some more dynamic look. Yeah. No matter what, I think my stars just have too much. There's just too many of them. I'm going to go into my brightness and contrast, sort of pull some of that stuff out. And that's what I was looking for. Okay, not bad. All right, now we see that my stars look way too randomly placed, as if I went there by hand and actually did this. So let's start to I'm gonna kill that one. And you know, actually I'm going to color dodge it, start to group a bunch of these little guys together, because that's what happens, is that these stars get grouped together, creating these interesting type shapes. So they're called twin systems, the ones with the two stars next to them. Of course, there is no limit to the amount of systems, but from what I understand, that the twin system is actually, you know, possible because of the dynamic weight. What happens is the suns actually rotate around each other, and their planets create a whiplash effect. Again, you can read some more about this on nasa.gov. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it's kind of a trick. I'm going to actually link all these together. And be careful not to run out of Photoshop layers. Boy, if I've done that many times. I'm going to say select new set from linked. I'm going to create this stars pass 1. Okay, I'm going to save it. Now what I want to do is I actually want to duplicate this layer. And obviously it doesn't look right, so I'm going to go ahead and select all those and say merge linked, creating one single layer. I'm going to put it outside of that layer box and get rid of the group, and turn back on my other layers. I'm going to select screen, or in fact put it underneath. That's what you want to do. Good. And I'm going to select the under the, there we go. I'm going to select that layer, and I'm going to select maybe color dodge one more time, or linear dodge, and see what happens. And I'm going to reduce the opacity if it will let me. I'm going to go filter blur, see if I can create an additional glow just around the stars. This might not work for you. It may not. Okay, not too bad. Now what we desperately need is an intermediary color from this rust type cloud in the foreground, the very, very foreground. I'm going to actually try a little trick just for testing the colors. Okay, that sort of brings it up close, right? Now what I might do is actually, since the resolution of it won't matter so much because it's clouds, I'm actually going to edit, transform, scale a little bit, bump it up, and I'm going to rotate it just a little bit. Now I could go in, and the foreground color in theory would be darker, right? I would have to add some mask to it, no problem. Let's just go ahead and create the color change. I'm going to go ahead and just do a shift and bring in that slightly blue color right there. And let me go ahead into my layer mask and create a soft brush, extremely soft brush, much larger, and just sort of paint out any mistakes. And that's being where that is. Let's go ahead and turn off our other layers, except for the black. And let's see how our colors are going. Now that's not so bad, right? I mean, you're getting the different colors here with the dust. Now we need a centralized dust. I'm going to lower the opacity of this one first. Lower the opacity of this one.